All right. Well, kia ora, everyone. Welcome to our third Copilot verse. I am super excited to have Elaiza Benitez, my fellow Kiwi, former MVP, all around awesome person, presenting at Copilotverse. So, Eliza, thank you so much for making the time for this. I know you've got a lot on your plate, and we will get right into it as we do at Copilotverse. So, Eliza, over to you.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on the show. I didn't realize I'm the third person to be speaking today. So cool. That's awesome. So today I am going to be sharing something that I've been working on, and that is showing how you can invoke desktop flows through an agent. But first of all, let me introduce myself. So hello, I'm Eliza. Now, Eliza, the name is usually spelled like this, right? But for my name, you can't spell it without AI. So going back to that first image that I shared, um, what an actual fact is that this image that you're looking at is in reference to the first ever chatbot, Eliza, that was built in 1966. So technically, I am a reincarnation of the first ever chatbot. But interestingly, back then, the extent of its natural language processing is that it didn't it didn't actually understood words. It just used patterns. So, for example, if you said "I feel sad," Eliza might reply with "Why do you feel sad?" or "Tell me about feeling sad." So it picks up on those patterns. But, fast forward to today, AI has changed everything. We now have large language models that can process, natural language. So, anyways, I'm Eliza. I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. That's me. We are in Power Platform Cloud Advocacy, and one of our main roles in advocacy is developing content for our developer community as well as connecting with them. So, one thing that we did launch early this year in September is Copilot Studio Agent Academy Recruit. So, this is free, self paced learning. Anna or Nathan will share the link in the chat so that you can all check it out when you can. And this is a way of helping you upskill in Microsoft Copilot Studio. So that leads to what I'm going to show today. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to be showing how you can have legacy processes still work with agents. And this came about because before I joined Microsoft, I used to post on my YouTube channel all things Power Automate. And internally, when the opportunity came up, so through Taiki Yoshida, who leads the CAT for development engineering team, and Eric Mintz in the Power Platform product marketing team, wanted to have an end-to-end solution built based on what Taiki presented back in May, which is this. April, who I think is in the call, put me forward because am known as someone who's passionate about Power Automate. It's been my first love in Power Platform. Power Platform, it's what reeled me into the Power Platform in the first place. So this process that you're seeing is a representation of um, a sales order process that could happen today. So essentially, you have a customer that gets in contact with you as a sales person or an account manager, and they want to put an order through of, let's say, products, but tied to that customer, they could have product discount codes, right? And those product discount codes could be in a different data source. So it's all about being able to understand what those discount codes are and then applying it to that sales order request from the customer. But then the next step would be to go and enter that sales request into the legacy ERP system, which doesn't have any web API. So this is where RPA, robotic process automation, comes into the picture. And we'll be using Power Automate Desktop today to create a desktop flow that will handle all of that logic for us. But that's based on the calculations of what that discounted product details are of the sales request from the customer. And then from there, it will then go back and trigger an agent flow, as in the autonomous bit will trigger an agent flow that will go and send the PDF. And then the other end of the equation is requesting approval and then logging it into the actual invoicing system. So what I am going to be showing is the first half of that equation. So let's dive into that. So when an email comes through, it's going to look like this. So this is what is known as unstructured data. So I'm not using a table. This is purely just like a sentence and, a question. But in there is some detail of what the product is and what the quantity is. Now, in terms of that other data source that I mentioned, where the discount codes for customers are stored elsewhere, this is in a OneNote. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, okay, shouldn't this be in something like a CRM, whether it's Salesforce, Oracle, or Dynamics 365, finance and operations, even an ERP system? But reality is this type of information can still be stored outside of those systems, because sometimes those types of users, like an account manager or a salesperson, isn't necessarily going to have direct access to something like an ERP. And the actual conversations will happen between the customer and the salesperson slash account manager. It's not going to happen to someone that's in manufacturing or in the inventory team. And so, how do we get these two pieces of information together? That's where we have agents, and agents can come in handy. So this agent is going to relieve that administrative burden for us. It's going to do that heavy lifting. And we achieve that using event triggers. So this is the autonomous piece of the agent, and AI prompts. So like I mentioned, we've got unstructured data that's in the email, and we also have unstructured data in the form of a OneNote for those customer product codes. So then we've got one prompt that will extract the product details from that email. Then we've got another AI prompt that will extract the discount for that customer that's specifically been allocated to that customer. And then we're going to use another AI prompt that's kind of going to act as a Venn diagram, where it's going to take both pieces, and in the middle, it's going to calculate what that discounted product pricing is. So once that autonomous piece has occurred, then it's going to go ahead and generate the quote in the legacy sales ERP system. And it's going to do that, as well as send and generate the quote and email it to the customer with, of course, our best friend, Power Automate, agent flows and desktop flows. So without further ado, let's jump into the demo. Okay, so let me bring up, but first of all, let me end the slideshow and we'll jump straight in. So I have an email here, and this is exactly what you saw in the slide deck, where I'm just saying, hey, this is the order that I want. Here's the product. Here's the quantity. Can you please send that quote? So what's going to happen behind the scenes is that I have an agent where it has an event trigger that's going to be looking at the inbox, and every time a new email comes in from a customer, it's going to do a filter on the subject where it contains order, and then it's going to go ahead and kick off the series of AI prompts. So what does that look like? Okay, so we can see it's writing. So the first AI prompt would have occurred where it has extracted the details from that email. Then it will go and extract the product discount codes from that OneNote page. Then the second AI prompt kicks in, where it's going to take a look at the product discount pricing for that customer and extract that. And then we have our third AI prompt that's acting as that Venn diagram that I referred to, where it's going to look at both pieces and be like, yep, I know exactly what I need to do. Here is the calculated discount product pricing for this sales request. And the output of this AI prompt is going to be a JSON, because in that piece, there is going to be a JSON object, which will act as the products array. And in that array is going to have all the different products that represent those line items that it needs to enter in the Power Automate desktop flow. So at the moment, you can see the Power Automate desktop flow in action, where it's now going through that JSON object and it's now adding those line items for me. I am not doing anything. Here are my hands. This is robotic process automation in action. And once it has generated that quote, it's going to go back to the main landing page. And then when we go back to our autonomous piece in Power Automate, it will then complete, and then it will go and send a message back to the agent. There you go. And then it will go and trigger the agent flow that is going to kick off the email with the quote PDF attached. And I'll show it to you shortly. So now it's come back through. And if I now open up the quote, oh, okay, nope, that didn't work. And now if I open up the quote, we can see the line items, quantity, it's applied the product discount, and it's done all of that for us simply by just sending an email with the power of an autonomous agent, with the power of a desktop flow, and with the power of an agent flow. So let me go back to my slides and let's dive into this further. So now that you've seen it end to end, I just want to take the time to explain, how does this actually work underneath the hood? So as I mentioned, we take a look, we have a trigger. So whenever a new email arrives, actually, I'll do one better. Let's go back into the actual flow itself so I can share it. By the way, did you all find that interesting? I can't really hear anyone right now or see the messages.
I'm still looking for the bottom half of my jaw, Elaiza. That was amazing.
Okay, so the filter is on the subject of order. So every time an email comes through and someone places an order, it'll look for it. Okay. Then if we go into this action, we have the first prompt, and it's going to ingest the message of that email. And so what the AI prompt is doing, it's going to look like this, but I'll switch over to Visual Studio Code so you can see it better, is I'm giving it, oh, that's a JSON. Hang on. Ah, let me just put that back there. Okay. Is that I'm giving it instructions. Let me just zoom in so you can see it. Where I've said, okay, I need you to identify the products and grab the quantity, and I want you to put it in the output of JSON. So in the AI prompt itself, it's actually the output is set from text to JSON. So it's going to look like this. So I'm telling it, hey, this is what I want it to look like. And then for that second prompt, I go back up. This is the one that is extracting the product details from the OneNote. So again, I'm giving it instructions where I'm saying, find the customer that this is associated with and find the products, what the discount percentage is, what the quantity thresholds are. So the way product discounts work is you could have, let's say, a product discount price for 20 and above, 50 and above, 100 above, and so forth. So that's what this means. And the original product price. And then again, I'm saying, give it in the format of JSON. And again, I'm feeding it an example of exactly what I want it to be. So then with the third prompt, this is the one that's piecing it all together. This is the one where I've given it more in-depth instructions of, first of all, how to calculate the end discount amount that you saw in the quote when it was generated. So it puts that at the end. And then in terms of the product name, if it contains t-shirts or t-shirts, because in the quote in the ERP system, the sales quote has the product named as something else compared to the inventory check in the ERP system. But then I'm also saying that I want the output to be this, and I'll explain why shortly. So basically, again, following that same pattern where I've told it, here's what I want the JSON object to be. So as you can see, we have that products array, and in every row of that products array is that line item. So it's got the product, it's got the product name, it's got the quantity, and what the discount should be. So that's what those AI prompts are doing. And then eventually it gets to our desktop flow. So what you saw was known as an attended desktop flow. So in other words, the VM has to be logged into and all of that. If I want to run this as unattended, then I would be logged out of the VM and this would all happen behind the scenes. But for the purpose of this demo, I made it attended so that you could see it live in action of it working. So then what we're sending back to the agent is not only the email, but that output of that product array from our third prompt. And we're doing that because this is what's going to be ingested by the other agent flow that will go ahead and generate that quote. So I've talked about agents, but I also want to highlight the power of Power Automate Desktop because there may be some people in the call today who aren't familiar with Power Automate Desktop. So here's a series of things that I've put together just to help your knowledge. So first of all, how do you capture the web UI elements? So in Power Automate Desktop, we have this thing called the recorder. So now if I just play this, this lets you record all the UI elements of that HTML site. So for now, I'm now hovering over sales. So it's going to copy everything that my mouse has clicked on and record it as an action. So you're seeing it on the right-hand side, how it's doing it live, and it's understanding that I'm now adding in line items, and one by one, I'm going to add a line item. So every time I make a click or interact with a UI element, the desktop flow UI element recorder is going to record this. And then when we finished that recording, it will go and set up all of those actions in the desktop flow. And then if I run it, again, it'll go and perform everything that it has recorded. So that's how UI elements work in desktop flows by using the recorder. So then the next bit is, okay, so now that I've manually told the recorder that, for every product, select a product and then enter the quantity, you saw me do that one by one. So the next piece is, how do I do that programmatically? Because this needs to happen behind the scenes without me, clicking each time. So now that it's understood what those actions are, the next step is to help it take it to the next level. So the first thing that we need to understand is how UI elements work in relation to desktop flows. Okay, so these are the actions, and we're going to focus on selecting the product in that ERP system. So every time you have an UI element, you can dive into the HTML construct. Now, at the moment, the option product names are explicitly typed, but we'll set it dynamically in the next video. Okay, so with this one, every HTML has an attribute. So this one is line items. So line items is their products array. So here I am just adding another line item. And then if we do Control-Shift-I, that will bring up the Edge developer tool. And then we can expect each element. So line items or line item will link to that attribute in the HTML underneath the hood. And the same with products. It will always be linked to an attribute. So every element is linked to an HTML attribute. And by understanding that, we can then configure it in the desktop flow to dynamically look at each attribute and tell it what to do. Okay, so now we have understood how the UI elements work with the HTML attributes. So now we need to tell it, okay, here's how I want you to select the product UI element using the ordinal. So in programming, ordinal is the zero-base index. It's about the position. So when you're dealing with arrays, it's always going to start with 0, and then it goes 1, 2, 3. So in our scenario, we have 3 products, right? So it's going to start with 0, 1, and 2. So if we wanted to select the first product in that line item, that ordinal is going to be 0. So this is what we're doing now. So we're looking at the product array, which is line items. Every product is a line item. And in that ordinal attribute, we can specify what number we want it to be. So this is linked to the product attribute in the HTML of this. So as you can see, every time I'm moving from one attribute to another, over on the left, you can see the corresponding UI element that it's linked to. So now going back in here, we're going to tell the desktop flow that we want to process the first product in the products array by giving it that equal 0. So that's that ordinal. And you can actually test in real time in desktop flows. So as you can see, I tested to make sure that it was going to specifically highlight that particular product, which was the first product in that products array. Okay, so that's how we do the product. Same concept with the quantity, where this time, instead of looking at that attribute of product in the line item, we're now going to look at the quantity in that line item attribute. And same thing, we're going to set the ordinal to equal 0. So the quantity is where the desktop flow will enter the number of products that needs to be ordered. So again, if we look at the dev tools and we inspect the actual UI element, we know that it's linked to the quantity attribute, which lies within the line item attribute. So again, this is where we can say we want it to equal 0. Okay. And then we're going to perform a test again. And so again, we're just going to check that it is, in fact, going to select the first line item in that products array. So that's that test done. Okay. So then what we do is exactly the same technique in the second line item in the products array. So I'm going to skip this because you've already seen how we can set the ordinal. So then the next part is how do we actually loop through the records dynamically. So this is just showing the test of running it through. I'm just going to skip ahead so that we can jump to the dynamic part for the interest of time. So this is the actual desktop flow. And I know this looks a bit daunting, but it's not, I promise. I'm going to do my best to explain it so that you understand. So like I mentioned, we have that products array, right? And so now we need to programmatically loop through each of those line items in that product array. And so for those of you who have worked with Cloud Flows or any other programming language, to achieve loops, we have to go through each product that exists in that array. So if you think of it as Excel, in Excel, we have a table, so that's an array. And in every table, there is a row. And for every row, there is columns. So in the context of this, the table is that products array. And for every row, each row is a line item, which represents that product. And in the columns of the Excel table, we'll have the information such as the product name, what the discount price should be, and so forth. So that is what we're going to be looping through. So first of all, we are going to have a variable that stores the length of the products array. So in our scenario, it's going to be 3 products, right? And then we have another array that sets the array row counter. So we want it to always start as 0 and increment, so add 1 each time it's finished adding that product line item. And then in this part, this is where we're instructing the desktop flow to iterate through every single product row that exists in that JSON object. So this is that JSON object that I'm referring to. This is the products array. So for every product, which is 3, I want you to go through each one and add that line item by entering the product and what the quantity should be until you reach the last one. So then with the next step, we are going to set that drop down product list value on the web page, and we're going to use the property that contains the product name for that web product drop down field. And behind the scenes, that's where we are also setting the ordinal. So we're saying set it to 0 because that is where we're currently at in this current loop. So this is the value that it's pulling through. And as you can see, how I'm setting the option name is dynamically pulling through the product name property from that JSON object for that line item. And for the next bit, for the quantity, I'm saying again, pull through the quantity from that line item, from that current item that we're looping through. And I want you to use that in the actual value for that text field of that quantity. So that was where the attribute equals quantity when we were looking at the HTML underneath the hood. And then this piece is checking whether we have any more product line items that need to be entered. So this is where it's now adding 1. So 0 plus 1 equals 1. Does it equal the length of the array, which is 3? No. So if it doesn't equal it, then go ahead and add a line item and repeat these same steps again. Otherwise, if it does equal 3, then that's when we know we've reached the end of the desktop flow and we don't want it to do anything. So that essentially is how the desktop flow works. Everything that you know, either in the form of Cloud Flows or any other programming language, those same concepts you can still apply today in Power Automate desktop. It's just a matter of knowing, which actions you need to add. And then we've got the agent flow that generates the quote PDF and emails it to customer. So this is just a standard agent flow. And before agent flows existed, we had Power Automate Cloud Flows. There are a lot of videos out there that exist today on YouTube. I know Damo or Damien Bird has a few videos that walk you through how to generate a Word document and then convert it to a PDF. So this is essentially what the flow is doing. So it's grabbing the JSON products array object that we passed to it from the event trigger. And then it is turning that input into JSON, because when it's passed through at the moment, like underneath the hood, it's just seeing it as text, as string. So we need to convert it back to JSON. And then we're parsing the JSON because we want to grab the values such as the product name, the quantity, what that discounted price is, and the total discounted price, because that's what we enter in the quote. And then we go and use a Word action where we're populating a Word template with that data from that products object. And then we're creating the file in SharePoint. And then we're going to convert that Word document to a PDF using the output of that file that was created. And then we're creating an item in SharePoint, just to be able to create a log of quotes that were generated. And then we're also attaching the PDF to that SharePoint item. And then the final step is where we saw the sending of the email. Now, one thing that I do want to highlight is the other piece that is important when you're working with agent flows is to specifically define what the input should be. So for something simple like an email address, it's pretty simple, right? Fill it with the email address that it needs to send to. However, when you're dealing with JSON objects, it's a different type of instruction. So if I just dump this in Visual Studio Code. I'm basically telling the description of my input. Here's what to expect. It's a JSON object. These are the properties that are going to be sent to you. And here's an example. And then that's how it knows that the products object that is passed from the autonomous piece to the agent flow is going to be gested by this. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So in terms of what I want to try next, so I had a conversation with Jay, who is in the CAT team internally, and got a lot of good feedback from him in regards of let's try and check whether we can hand over some of this autonomous or automation to the agent orchestration, because a lot of what you saw today through the event trigger was actions defined by the flow, as well as in the agent flow that goes and sends the PDF to the customer. I want to see whether I can leverage it in topics and tools. There's also in preview WebDriver for Power Automate desktop flows instead of the web extension. But last time I tried, I couldn't use the UI element recorder with the WebDriver. I had to switch over from WebDriver to the web extension and then the web extension back to the WebDriver. So we'll see. And then for the Power Automate desktop flow, I want to see whether the same thing can be achieved with computer use. So I have been trying it out. So watch this space. And the reason for that is with what you saw in desktop flow, it does require some knowledge and skill, even though you do have to apply those same programming skills, like I talked about, like iterating through an array. Knowing what actions to use in desktop flows is sometimes a bit overwhelming. And so with computer use, it kind of breaks that barrier, right? You can just give it natural language and it will do its thing. So these are things that I want to try next. So watch this space. This is something I am planning to put on our Agent Academy as a side quest mission. So other things that I do want to share, if you want to have a more understanding of how UI elements work with Power Automate desktop flows, highly recommend checking out this video by Anders Jensen. He is one of our prominent Microsoft MVPs in the RPA space. And yeah, he has great instructional videos. He has his own course, so go and check him out. If you also want to learn more about how automation or where automation is heading in Power Platform space, there is this Ignite breakout session. Now, Nathan and Anna can share the link in the chat. This is a good one because they do talk about why you would use computer use over desktop flow. So highly recommend that. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. I think I might have gone over time a bit. I do have a feedback survey form in here. Not gonna lie, I haven't presented virtually in months, so hopefully I did a good job with trying to explain things. Yeah, I will
That was
now go
brilliant,
and
Elaiza.
check the chat and see whether people have been saying things. I think there's some Q&A.
Yep. Brilliant
Okay,
presentation, Elaiza. Thank you.
Carl, thank you. Christian has just left the chat. Let's see. I think I see some Q&A. Oh no, that's you, Nathan.
Yeah, I don't see anything in there specifically for you, Elaiza. But yeah, amazing presentation. Thank you so much. That was really, really, really insightful. Um, yeah, thank you all so much for coming to November's. Oh, hang on. Sean's got some questions.
Can the whole thing have been built in agent flows? Have you seen other people be successful with computer use in Power Automate desktop? Okay, well, I'll be honest with that one. For computer use, I have the only time that I have seen it is through presentations. I have tried it myself, and that was using the samples that are provided in the Microsoft Learn documentation. But this is why I made it clear that I want to see whether it will work in passing a JSON object as an input to the computer use tool, because there are times where we need to give it that, rigid information and instruct it exactly what we want it to do. So that is something that I personally want to try myself. And then the other question was, can the whole thing have been built in agent flows? Yes and no. So if you take a look at that Ignite breakout session, it's a matter of selecting what scenario uh, fits with you. And I think one of the things that people haven't looked into, but we have mentioned it in our Agent Academy recruit, so just plug that in there, is that whenever you use Power Automate Cloud Flows, that will use the plan of the owner. Whereas when you use Agent Flows, it will use the plan of Copilot Studio. But to answer that question specifically of whether the whole thing could have been built in Agent Flows, the RPA bit, certainly not. You can't do that in an agent flow. That specifically has to be done in an RPA tool. So that would either be in the form of desktop flows, or the AI equivalent would be computer use. Or the event trigger, the autonomous piece, maybe, but at the same time, it goes back to just assessing, where you want the autonomy to lie. I don't think I answered that greatly.
No, that was awesome. I was mostly curious, like obviously Power Automate Desktop has to be in Power Automate Desktop because that's what it is. I was mostly curious, is there anything Power Automate Cloud can do that agents can't?
When you are working with the agent orchestrator, it can understand prompts that you send back to it in the form of natural language, whereas with cloud flows or agent flows, it works based on the JSON responses of each action or trigger, if that makes sense. So in a scenario where you are wanting some more flexibility in handling things that your agent flow or cloud flow doesn't account for, that's where, kind of have to be like, how is my agent going to handle this? And you can define that in the instructions of the agent. So, for example, in our Agent Academy, in one of the operative missions, which we are planning to launch, it teaches you how to handle those scenarios. I won't give much until you've seen it launch, but yeah, I'm doing terribly here, so I'm gonna stop trying to answer the question.
All good. Elaiza, thank you so much for the session. That was amazing. Really appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much to everybody for coming along to this month's Copilotverse. Anna, Sean, anything you'd like to add before we end the call?
No, I
That
just
was
want to add,
sick.
yes, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Elaiza, for your amazing demo. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to come back on the show at another time. Maybe we can show a little bit of operative for Agent Academy live.
Yes, as soon as that
Love
will
it.
launch, I will be in touch with you again. So watch that
or
space.
we'll have someone else in our cloud advocacy team join the show.
Yes. I'm looking at April sharing her hearts with us. So yes, maybe April will agree as well.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you next month at Copilotverse.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks
so
all.
much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.